We all have those handful of television shows that we watched as kids and always went back to because of how memorable they were, either due to their characters, story, creativity, and etc. One of those shows from my childhood that I can never forget is the Disney Channel original animated series American Dragon Jake Long. Much like Ben 10, Danny Phantom, Randy Cunningham, Kim Possible, and My Life as a Teenage Robot, American Dragon was one of those superhero shows that seemed to base itself off of prior heroic characters, but was still its own thing, not being derived from any previous superhero material. Living a double life just got a whole lot more complicated when the other half of you is trying to protect the entire secret magical community while also making sure you study for your history test. American Dragon Jake Long is a coming-of-age tale following Jake Long, a 13-year-old Chinese-American New Yorker living in Manhattan who stems from a long line of shape-shifting dragons. He's voiced by the talented Dante Bosco, who you all might recognize as Prince Zuko. His love interest Rose, voiced by Mae Whitman, who would go on to voice Katara. So all you Katara shippers can rejoice. In this video, I'm going to take you on a trip down memory lane back to the years of 2005 to 2007 to revisit an old animated favorite and classic well beyond its years, American Dragon Jake Long. American Dragon was created by Jeff Good. The original idea for this show was that it was going to be a live-action show similar to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, intended to be on Fox and would have been a lot more darker, with the main character Jake having to deal with dragon slayers who killed his parents. But before the pitch meeting could happen, one of the executives who were interested in the show left the network. The show was then pitched to Disney Channel and reworked to become more family friendly. Cultural consultant for the show was Professor Yun, PhD, an author and faculty member at UCLA's Department of Anthropology, having areas of expertise in folklore, mythology, the Chinese dragon, Chinese family, and kinship. The series was a production of Wang Film Productions and Walt Disney Television Animation in association with Disney Channel. In my opinion, I'm actually glad this was the end result. I mean, it would have been cool to see what the original premise would have turned out to be, but there's a lot more you can pull off in animation than you could in live action, especially when it comes to television. Now, what separates these dragons from quite possibly every other kind of dragon in fiction is that, unlike most stories, these dragons aren't here to destroy villages or cause chaos, but have been acting as the protectors of the supernatural world and keeping the peace for nearly a century and a half. In fact, according to Jeff Good's website, the stereotype that dragons are ferocious damsel in distress snatchers comes from a single unfortunate incident in medieval Europe. But the fire-breathing monsters of European lore are really only the tip of the dragonberg. In China, dragons are considered benevolent spirits who control the wind and the rain. In Japan, there are shapeshifters who sometimes appear to lost travelers in the form of wise old sages or helpful young maidens with a good sense of direction. In fact, dragons appear to have been many things to many creatures over the centuries, but no humans have ever gotten the whole story, until now. Now Jake is the American dragon, meaning his job is to protect and oversee the entire section of the magical underworld within Greater New York, being protector and champion of unicorns in Central Park, the leprechauns of Wall Street, the gargoyle nest atop the Empire State Building, the Triborough Troll Bridge, the mystical city between NoHo and Soho, and the underwater Hudson mermaids. But even with all that responsibility, he's still in training. Jake is probably the most I've ever related to an animated character. Aside from the dragon stuff, he's a hip-hop loving and skateboarding kid, which is basically who I was in my early preteens. There's also an Australian dragon, an Egyptian dragon, a Guatemalan dragon, a Korean dragon, etc. and so forth. We see Jake go through the challenges of being a teenager, a dragon, and a teenage dragon, from figuring out who he can take to the school dance, going through a molting cycle, and being a good older brother to his younger sister Haley. Speaking of Haley, in episode 4 of season 1, Haley's tooth is falling out, and realizing this, an evil dentist who used to work for the Tooth Fairy steals her tooth and plants it in soil. Long story short, when the dragon tooth is planted in soil, a great evil is unleashed upon the world. This evil being the dentist turning into a giant tooth monster, which leads to a fight that takes place across New York. This was the only episode that confused me, since we see the tooth monster breaking into homes and rampaging around the city, and ever since the first time I saw this episode, I wondered why the magical world hadn't been ousted after these events. I guess you can just chalk it up to New Yorkers have seen it all and they just don't care, but this was also one of the earlier episodes, so that's also a possibility. Besides the lore of the worlds, one of my favorite things about this show that got me even today when I was rewatching the series was Jake's relationship with Rose. Jake's responsible for protecting the magical world, but Rose has a secret of her own, as she's a part of an organization known as the Huntsmen, who make it their sole purpose to destroy all life within the magical world. There's also Jake's lovable best friends, Trixie and Spud, Professor Rotwood, Jake's mythology teacher who's aware of the existence of magical creatures, but everyone just thinks he's crazy, and a bunch of other fun characters, including one of my favorites, Brad, who's basically just this show's Flash Thompson.
Hey, Rosalicious!
Hi, Brad.
So guess what? The Bratsters turned over a new leaf. A leaf of sensitivity and compassion. You know, junk like that. Watch this. Woohoo! That's right! The Bratster's not afraid to cry, yeah! You like that, baby, don't you?
Oh, I'll give that guy something to cry about.
My favorite episodes are Season 1's Shapeshifter, where Jake learns about the dragon ability of shapeshifting and uses this new power to attain his parent-teacher conference as his own parents, impresses Rose by turning into her favorite pop star, and impresses his friends and other peers. This episode falls in the season at a strange time. It's episode 11 airing-wise, but production-wise it's episode 2. So it's strange to see when Trixie and Spud learn that Jake is a dragon, go on a couple missions and have fun, and then we see this episode where they have yet to do any of that. Another favorite is Season 2's The Doppelganger Gang, where Jake learns about another dragon ability of being able to use his chi in order to create copies of himself. But because he's still in training and has yet to master this ability, just like in Shapeshifter, he uses a potion to tap into that power, which leads to him having to fight off an evil version of himself who's already absorbed the other Jakes within him. This episode blew my mind and messed me up at the same time when I was little. There's also Jake Takes the Cake, where he has to round up a bunch of gremlins in order to save a wedding, Halloween Bash, where Jake is caught by the public in his dragon form, and everyone thinks he's in the costume, leading him to throw the biggest Halloween party he can think of, inviting both magical creatures and humans alike. Act 4, Scene 15, The Academy, The Egg, Switcheroo, and I can go on and on about all my favorite episodes, but there's no need for this video to be that long. I spoke about the Hunts Clan, but there are a whole lot of other diverse and pretty entertaining villains, like the Dark Dragon. Years ago, magical creatures used to roam the earth freely until they were driven into the shadows by humans. The Dark Dragon's plan is to recruit Jake and his magical army in order to overthrow the humans and take back the planet. So, you know, classic villain who means well but isn't going about it the best way. The Dark Dragon was originally going to be an evil version of Jake from the future, which is why they look so similar, but as cool as that would have been, that concept was scrapped and the Dark Dragon resembles Jake, well, just because. There's also Eli Penderis, a billionaire wizard who uses his prowess to become even more richer. But besides the Dark Dragon, my favorite villain would have to be the Strigoi, a group of vampire-like creatures who instead of feeding on human blood, they feed on dragon blood. Sadly, they only appear once in Season 2. Speaking of, in Season 2, Kim Possible's Steve Lotor joined the show as executive producer along with Zach Negrete and Eddie, this last name I can't pronounce, who all requested the animation change as the current animation was too expensive to maintain, with Jake's dragon form being a Chinese dragon instead of having a Western dragon appearance as he did in Season 1. In all honesty, I think the animation is an improvement as it matches and helps carry the action sequences. The second season's writing is actually funnier in my opinion as well, and they get much more darker with some of their themes in certain episodes. American Dragon is also a part of a greater world than we see. This show crossed over with Lilo and Stitch, who had a crossover with Recess, Kim Possible, and the Proud family, with Penny Proud actually being a close childhood friend of Jake. But sadly, this series didn't last as long as those. After Season 2, although a third season was written and a movie had been planned to be made, American Dragon was cancelled due to low ratings as a certain percentage of fans stopped watching due to the change in animation. Reruns would continue to air from 2007 to 2010, before moving over to Disney XD until 2012, which brings us to today, where the show can live on with many other shows and movies that bring us nostalgia on Disney+. But hey, if the Proud Family can get a revival after not being on air for over 18 years, maybe Jake will be able to dragon up just one more time.
Dragon up!
Although the show was cancelled after its second season, the show still left us on a bittersweet ending that in my honest opinion I wouldn't change. Without spoiling it, the American Dragon finale ends with our main team, with the help of everyone we've met along the way, teaming up to stop the big bad, and taught 7-year-old me his first lesson about change. How to move on and be hopeful even after some of the darkest times. Before this show, I don't really remember having an interest in anything related to magical creatures. I remember clearly back in 2005, my sister and I were highly anticipating this show. We both sat down in front of the television at my grandmother's house and were introduced to a whole new world that we remember for years to come. Wizards, trolls, genies, goblins, and of course dragons. This series introduced me to it all. In this video, I talked a lot about what the show means to me, but I hope for those who haven't seen this show before immerse themselves in a pretty awesome world. Not only can you watch this show on Disney Plus now, finally, but you can also check out Jeff Good's website and find out even more about this interesting lore. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you when I see you.